often glamorized in the movies, as illustrated by The Godfather. However, real life in the mob is often nasty, brutish, and short, as a result of having to deal with violent sociopaths in the workplace on a regular basis. As many mafiosi discovered, their greatest career risk was not law enforcement and the criminal justice system, but their own criminal colleagues putting a hit out on them. Following are 20 of the most fascinating or significant hits in the history of the American mob. Number 10. Family Betrayal, Big Jim Colosimo. Vincenzo Big Jim Colosimo was an early 20th century Chicago mobster who specialized in prostitution, running over 100 whorehouses in the Windy City. When his business was plagued by extortionists trying to shake him down, he called in his wife's nephew, an NYC gangster named Johnny Torrio, to handle it. Torrio took care of the problem and stayed in Chicago as Colosimo's right-hand man. Torrio was a criminal visionary, and when Prohibition arrived in 1920, he immediately grasped its potential. He sought to buy shuttered breweries for pennies on the dollar, to operate them illegally and supply the thousands of speakeasies, brothels, and nightclubs in Chicago and the surrounding region. Colosimo rejected the idea, reasoning that doing so would drag him into confrontations with other Chicago mobsters that he would sooner avoid, and decreed that nobody in his organization was to participate in bootlegging. Torrio went ahead and brought the breweries behind his boss's back, and when Colosimo started getting suspicious, his underling struck first. He informed Colosimo that a shipment was due to arrive at his cafe, and when the boss went to collect it, he was shot and ambushed by Frankie Yale, an NYC gangster brought to Chicago specially for the task, on May 11, 1920. Number 9. Frankie Yale discovers that robbing Al Capone is a bad idea. Frankie Yale, 1893 to 1928, the hitman who took out Big Jim Colosimo, got his start as a teenager in NYC's 5 Points gang, where he earned a reputation as a ferocious fighter. By age 19, he had his own protection and extortion racket, which operated out of a Coney Island bar, where Al Capone got his start, working for Yale. From protection rackets, Yale soon branched out into prostitution, running a string of whorehouses. When Prohibition arrived, he got into illegal booze and became one of Brooklyn's biggest bootleggers. Yale and Al Capone were friendly, but things soured in 1927 when Yale got greedy and started hijacking the Chicago gangsters' trucks. A meeting failed to resolve matters, and Capone set plans in motion for his former boss's downfall. On July 1, 1928, Yale received a call that something was wrong with his wife. Refusing to wait for his usual escort of bodyguards, he jumped into his armor-plated car and sped off, only to be intercepted en route by gunmen who riddled his car and shot him to death with armor-piercing bullets. Number 8. The failed hit that made Al Capone Chicago's boss. After seeing to the rubbing out of Big Jim Colosimo, Johnny Torrio took over his deceased relative's criminal empire and built it into what became the Chicago Outfit. Within a few years, Torrio was the city's biggest mobster and its most powerful criminal kingpin, with Al Capone as his chief underling. As the outfit expanded its operations from its base in Chicago's South Side, it came into conflict with the Irish-American North Side gang. After initial attempts at peaceful coexistence failed, Torrio ordered the murder of North Side boss Dean O'Banion in November 1924, sparking a bloody gang war. Northside gangsters responded by ambushing Torrio outside his apartment with a fusillade of gunfire. He miraculously survived, despite taking bullets to the jaw, lung, abdomen, groin, and legs. Severely wounded, Torrio was spared from a finishing shot to the skull when the killer's gun jammed. The near-death experience frightened Torrio and convinced him to get out while he still could. In 1925, he handed control of the Chicago outfit to Al Capone and moved to Italy. Number 7. Joe the Boss Masseria. Joe Masseria, 1887 to 1931, fled Sicily as a teenager in 1903 to escape a murder indictment, and emigrated to America, which had no extradition treaty with Italy at the time. He became an enforcer for an NYC gang, worked his way up to gang boss, and by the mid-1920s, had become one of the city's biggest criminal kingpins. Prohibition and illegal alcohol boosted his career, and by 1929, he was the Big Apple's biggest crime boss. He founded what became today's Genovese crime family, and dominated NYC's criminal world until his death in 1931. In early 1930, rivalry with a rising competitor, Salvatore Maranzano, erupted into a gang war. In the ensuing bloodletting, which came to be known as the Castellano's War, over 60 mafiosi were slaughtered. The conflict finally ended when Masseria was betrayed by his own men after they cut a deal with his rival, Maranzano. On April 15, 1931, Masseria was dining and playing cards with his chief lieutenant, Charles Lucky Luciano, at a restaurant, when the latter excused himself to go to the bathroom. Then a hit squad that included future crime bosses Vito Genovese, Bugsy Siegel, and Albert Anastasia, burst into the restaurant and shot Masseria dead. Number 6. The last boss of all bosses. Salvatore Maranzano, 1886-1931, Castellamare, Sicily, founded what became the Bonanno crime family, and instigated the Castellamare's war against Joe Masseria for control of New York's criminal world. After winning that war, he reorganized the American Mafia, setting up a basic hierarchical structure that survives to this day. Each established family would henceforth have a boss and underboss, and beneath them would be caporegimes, or captains, in command of soldiers. Above them all, Maranzano declared himself capo di tutti capi, or boss of all bosses, the last such occurrence in the American Mafia's history. Maranzano was an egomaniac with delusions of grandeur, who fancied himself a Julius Caesar of crime. When he tried to impose Italian mafia customs upon American mobsters raised in the U.S., it backfired. 5 months after Maranzano declared himself capo di tutti capi, Lucky Luciano arranged for 4 mobsters to visit his office on September 10, 1931, posing as taxmen. They disarmed Maranzano's guards, then shot and stabbed him to death. After that hit, Luciano abolished the boss of all bosses title, and set up a collective mafia leadership council commission to avoid future gang wars. Number 5. Murder Incorporated and Dutch Schultz. After the deaths of Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano, Lucky Luciano set up a cooperative entity, the Commission, to run the Italian-American Mafia and arbitrate its disputes. To give the Commission teeth, Luciano set up a streamlined contract-killing organization that came to be known as Murder Incorporated. Headed by Louis Lepke Buchalter, Murder Incorporated acted as the muscle and enforcers of the Mafia's higher-ups. In theory, mob killings had to be pre-approved by the Commission, who would then task Murder Incorporated with carrying out the murders. Their most famous victim was Dutch Schultz. Schultz was close friends with many mob higher-ups, including Lucky Luciano, but he threatened to become a loose cannon after crusading prosecutor Thomas Dewey put him in his crosshairs. Schultz sought permission from the Commission to kill Dewey, but was turned down. The mob had a strict policy against targeting law enforcement. When Schultz gave signs that he might go rogue and kill Dewey anyhow, the Commission ordered his death before he invited a catastrophic backlash upon all by murdering the prominent prosecutor. 3 Murder Incorporated hitmen tracked Schultz down to the Palace Chop restaurant in Newark, New Jersey, where they executed him, his accountant, and 2 bodyguards. Number 4. Murder Incorporated and Harry Millman. Another major hit carried out by Murder Incorporated claimed Harry Millman, a problematic Detroit gangster, in November 1937. Millman was a bootlegger who stirred trouble with vendettas against members of his own and competing gangs. His behavior was bad for business, and the locals repeatedly tried to do him in, but failed, including a car bomb that killed an unfortunate valet attendant, but spared Millman. Finally, the Commission got involved. A call was made to Murder Incorporated, and it sent 2 killers, Harry Strauss and Harry Mayane, to Detroit. Upon arrival, the duo began planning the hit. It was simplified by the fact that Millman was a known drunkard who spent a lot of time at a few favored bars. Mayane and Strauss picked the most suitable bar for their hit and planned out their entrance and exit and escape routes. Then they simply walked into the bar and started shooting. After killing Millman, the duo made their escape and were on a train back to NYC before their victim's corpse had turned cold. Although there had been numerous eyewitnesses, the hitmen were out-of-towners unknown to any locals, so nobody was able to identify them. Number 3. Kid Twist, the canary who couldn't fly. Abe Kid Twist Relis was a Lower East Side gangster who ended up as one of Murder Incorporated's leading hitmen. In 1940, he was implicated in the killing of a minor gangster, and to save himself, he agreed to spill the beans and testify against his colleagues in over 200 murders. It was the first inkling the authorities had of the streamlined contract killing machine's existence, which by then had carried out over 1,000 hits, and it led to the unraveling of Murder Incorporated. Relis turned out to be a savant, with a freakish photographic memory that allowed him to testify in detail about every murder he had been involved in or her state's evidence, and joined him in testifying against their former colleagues. They and Relis were stashed by the authorities in the Half Moon Hotel in Coney Island. Early in the morning of November 12, 1941, with police guarding the door, Relis fell out of his 6th-floor room's window. Police explained it as an accidental death, but it was clear that the mob had gotten to his police bodyguards, and that one or more of them had pushed him out. As one mobster put it, the canary could sing, but he couldn't fly. Number 2. The execution of the Lord High Executioner. Albert Anastasia, 1902 to 1957, was Murder Incorporated's second in command, second only to Lepke Buchalter. He rose to head the entire operation in 1936, when Buchalter had to go on the lam. Unlike Buchalter, who had kept a low profile, Anastasia enjoyed letting everybody know that he was a vicious murderer. He took such joy in his duties with Murder Incorporated that he became the most feared mobster of his era, earning the nicknames Lord High Executioner and the Mad Hatter. He survived Murder Incorporated's unraveling when the chief witness against him, Abe Relis, fell to his death from a 6th-floor window just before he was scheduled to testify against Anastasia. He went on to found the Gambino crime family, until karma belatedly caught up with him on October 25, 1957, in the barber shop of NYC's Park Sheraton Hotel. As the Mad Hatter relaxed in his chair, 2 assassins, their faces covered with scarves, burst in, shoved the barber out of the way, and riddled Anastasia with bullets. Number 1. The most significant mob hit backfired horribly on the mob. Perhaps no single mob hit had a more significant or longer-lasting impact on the Italian-American Mafia than one that took place on October 15, 1890 in New Orleans, claiming the life of the city's police chief. Rival Sicilian crime families had been engaged in a turf war over control of the waterfront, and when the violence spilled over, the citizens clamored for the authorities to do something about it. When the police chief launched an investigation of mafia activities, he was gunned down as he was walking home from work. His last words before expiring were, "The Dagos shot me." The backlash was immediate, and 19 mobsters were arrested and prosecuted. In a first trial of 9 of them, the defendants successfully tempered with the jury, and despite overwhelming evidence, 6 were acquitted while the other 3 had hung juries. The following day, March 14, 1891, a mob numbering in the thousands, including some of New Orleans' most prominent citizens, stormed into the prison housing the defendants, and lynched 11 of them. It was the biggest single mass lynching in American history. It had a salutary effect, by demonstrating to the mob that America was not the old country, where criminals could get away with brazen defiance of law and order. In response, the mob adopted strict rules against targeting law enforcement, even preemptively killing mafiosi who threatened to go after cops or prosecutors.